Hello, everyone, and welcome to class. I am Dr. Singh. I am your instructor for this course, which is called The Religions of China. And this is just a brief introductory lecture about, what are we going to be doing in this class? All right, and let's take a closer look. So the class is REL 218, so make sure you're in the right class. Religions of China. Well, the first question is, where is China? Well, China is part of the Eurasian subcontinent, and it is in the region of Asia called East Asia. But what exactly are the borders? Where are the borders of China? Where does China stop and where does China end? Well, we're going to learn that's changed over time. So the borders have fluctuated historically. Often different dynasties, different rulers had different domains. When we talk about China today and China in this class, we're talking about the area that's called often mainland China and some of the surrounding areas like the Tibetan Plateau and Taiwan. This is part, so when we talk about China, we have a political context, a context of where are the political borders of what is today called the People's Republic of China versus the cultural context. This is, by culture, we mean the influence of music, of language, of art, architecture, of even religion throughout Asia. And from China, we're going to see a diversity of different traditions that are going to have broad influence all throughout Asia and even all throughout the globe in modern times. So where do we begin? Well, let's begin by looking a little bit at this map. What do we see colored in here? What are these maybe pictures of? What's that? Yes, these are pictures of rivers. These are 4 rivers that would give rise to what are called the Great River Valley civilizations of the world. So our ancestors, we're going to learn in the religions of China, ancestors are very, very, very important. So our ancestors, your ancestors, my ancestors, are the ancestors of our shared human race. Throughout history, they would follow water. Why? Why do you think they would follow water? Such as the river behind us, the Yangtze River. Well, waters are sources of life. They're sources of transportation, of trade. You need to drink water to live. You use water to grow crops. So historically, when we look at the history of humanity, 4 great river valley civilizations will stand out. We have the Nile River in Egypt. We have the Tigris and Euphrates, and this would give rise to the ancient Mesopotamian culture. The Indus and the Ganges River, these are 2 different rivers, would give rise to many of the ancient civilizations of India. And our main river for this class, the Yangtze River, would be the source of early society and civilization in ancient China. So we're here at the Yellow River Valley civilization. And what do we want to know about the Yellow River Valley? Well, we want things to remain in harmony. We're going to learn more about what you're seeing right now, which is the symbol of the yin and the yang. But in short, for today's class, let's just say it's a symbol of harmony, of unity of opposites. This theme of harmony, this theme of different forces coming together to live and coexist and flourish together, this is an important theme throughout the history of the religions of China. Let's take a look. This is the paradigm of the religions of China. These are going to be important themes that we're going to, well, this slide, these images represent important themes that we're going to be addressing throughout the semester. See if you can make out any of the images. Okay, so the union, the harmony. This here is the symbol of heaven. This is the symbol of earth. The unity of heaven and earth, the harmony, the oneness. Heaven in the ancient Nile River Valley was the realm of the ancestors and the heavenly governments. Religion and government, religion and bureaucracy is another important theme we're going to look at in this class, in that the government on earth, the way that society is structured on earth, for many of the ancient China, many of those who dwelled in ancient China, our world ought to represent a heavenly world. Our government ought to represent a heavenly government. So in between heaven and earth, we have the king or the emperor, who was in charge of using these practices of telling the future or communicating with spirits. And we call this divination. And from ancient practices of divination, we're going to get the modern day script of China. So the emperor would communicate with the government in heaven and figure out how to best rule here on earth. So that's the emperor, that's the king. Well, for everyone else on earth has access to the world, of the heavenly world of the ancestors, vis-a-vis the practice of showing respect for the ancestor. These are altars to the ancestor, and these are tablets to the ancestor that we're seeing here. So that on earth, the altar could symbolize a gateway between heaven and earth. Again, we're going to go over all of this in detail throughout the semester, just giving you a brief snapshot. Again and again, our starting point is this river, the Yangtze River, from which we're going to get the diverse history of Chinese religions. So harmony, again, as a principle that will arise in ancient China, has two social foundations: the emperor or the government. The emperor and the government is meant to mirror the will of heaven on earth. And the family or the ancestors. So there's a combination of harmony between the ancestors and the living descendants. This is an important concept in Chinese cultures and histories. A harmony of heaven and earth. Starting next week, we'll look at a really core idea called the mandate of heaven. And the emperor and the dynasties throughout the history rule because heaven has ordained them to rule, because they can govern, they being whoever the ruling parties are, can govern according to the will of heaven. We're going to see also the importance of family, again and again, structure of family and family life and the virtue of the family. Symbolized by here, this is a festival of making offerings to the ancestors, and these are tablets dedicated to ancient ancestors. All about harmonizing heaven and earth, the worlds of the living and the worlds of the ancestors. Again, this is the foundations of the Yellow River Valley civilization from which later day Chinese traditions will evolve. In this class, we're going to look at how, from the basis of this valley, these different ruling units will emerge. And we call these different ruling units the dynasties. These are the great dynasties of China, each contributing to the developments of the language, the culture, the religion. And we'll start next week with the Shang dynasty. And we'll look at these different dynasties in this class. So the religions of China. Anybody know what some of the religions of China are? What are some of the religions you think you'll see in China? Well, I couldn't hear what you said, but you were probably right, because China is incredibly a diverse place, a diversity of different ethnic groups, different linguistic groups, different religious communities. And most of the major religions we find in the world, we can find in China. Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism. But to answer this question of what makes Chinese religion, what gives Chinese religion kind of its main specificity? What distinguishes it from what we might think of as religion here in, say, North America or here in Greensboro? Well, we could ask this big question, what is religion? And you can maybe pause and think and reflect on that for a second. So what do you think religion is? Well, religion in China throughout history, this is just a historical theme, is more practice-based and rooted in cultural traditions, but not necessarily belief. For example, when I ask that question, what is religion? Students often say it's a system of beliefs. Well, for some in the history of Chinese religions, belief has been important. For most, it's been about what you do, how you act in the context of your family, society, the temple, with respect to your governments. What you do, but not the idea of belief is often secondary. Rituals, as we'll see, are very, very, very important in the history of Chinese religions. Now, an individual can have multiple religions. This is an idea that maybe we're not so familiar with here. You know, what is your religion? Pick one. That's often the connotation when someone asks, well, what is your religion? You got to have one, and they're only looking for one answer when somebody asks you that question. In China, one can practice a multiplicity, and key word here, practice, a multiplicity of rituals and cultural traditions from different, quote unquote, religions. So one can belong or have affiliation to multiple religions. And this is not just unique in China, but throughout much of Asia. And one can also have no religion, or what I call occasional religion. It could be the case that somebody does not identify with any one religious group. One does not say, I'm a Buddhist or I'm a Christian, but they could be occasionally religious, meaning that those who don't claim a religion might participate in festivals which honor the ancestors of the past and make offerings to the ancestors of the past. Or they might call in Buddhist monks to provide recite scriptures, say during a wedding or after the loss of a family member. So, or one might consult a shaman. This is someone who can enter altered states of consciousness and communicate with spirits. Maybe someone's going through maybe somebody doesn't have a religion that they think or identify with, but they're going through some bad luck. So they go to a shaman who communicates with local gods of the river or gods of the mountain or goddesses of the river. So no religion or occasional religion. This is another way that one could identify, and not just in China, but throughout the world. But over time, 3 main religions would become associated with the dynasties that would have much of their roots in this Yellow River Valley. What are those 3 main religions? Take a guess. Write them down. What do you think are the 3 main religions of China? Let's take a look. All right, take a look at these images if you can identify anyone. This is the figure of Confucius, although we'll learn next week that Confucius is actually not a Chinese title per se. But Confucian, so what becomes known as Confucianism, that's one of our major religions. What about here? This is the Buddha, so Confucianism and Buddhism. And this is Lao Tzu, an ancient sage who is the founder of the tradition of Taoism. So the big 3 we have are Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. Well, who's who? How can you figure out, does this group belong to Confucius or Lao Tzu or Buddha? Well, this goes back to what we just learned a little bit earlier, that it's not uncommon to subscribe to multiple religious practices. This is common throughout much of Asia. And here's a quote by a really smart scholar. It's even in his name that he's smart. His name is Ninian Smart, really smart guy. And he says this: Westerners have often been confused about religion in China. They have assumed that religious and philosophical ideals can be classified in a Western way. Pause there. So Western way, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, we can kind of put people in boxes. Now let's get back to the text. So that we can speak of 3 religions of China, namely Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. But often these are not so much 3 as part of a single functioning system. So as we learn about Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, we don't necessarily need to be thinking about these as 3 separate, distinct religions that are followed by different groups. Although some contexts that could be true, but for the most part, followers of one are followers of the other 2. And the 3 of these work together to create the religious foundations that are going to develop throughout the history of this Yellow River Valley civilization. Let's take a look at just briefly at some of the big key ideas of these traditions. So Confucius was about, how do we here on earth live in a way that is heavenly, in a way that our great ancestors would approve of? He says that laws are of finite benefits. Simply following rules is not enough. We have to change who we are inside. We have to become more moral, virtuous individuals, not just blindly follow rules. The virtue of the family will ensure a happy afterlife, and this will please the ancestors. So if everyone in the family lives a virtuous life, the ancestors in heaven are pleased, and great happiness will exist between heaven and earth. Heaven and earth will live in harmony, just as the family lives in harmony. Rules and etiquette create virtuous rulers and individuals. So the laws that we have, the rules that we have to follow, there's an intention, and that is to transform us into virtuous individuals. But also very important is the ruler, the emperor, must be virtuous. And it's virtue that harmonizes heaven and earth. Again, this is just a snapshot of Confucianism. And for Confucius, the ancestors are very, very important. The ancestors living in heaven. Living a virtuous life, this is what's going to create harmony between us and our ancestors. And this will create harmony in the valley, harmony in the government. So learning to practice virtue and become a virtuous person. This is Lao Tzu. This is our second religion, Taoism. And he says, the more laws and regulations there are, the poorer the people become, the more rules and regulations, the more thieves and robbers. Think about maybe what he's saying there, and we're going to look more closely at his at the writings associated with this figure Lao Tzu. But Taoism is this unseen force. It is this unseen force that harmonizes heaven and earth. You can't really talk about it or understand it through words, but it can be experienced through meditation, through ritual, through yoga, through different practices of experiencing this force that harmonizes heaven and earth. We're also going to see the use of medicines, of alchemies. These are ancient potions and tonics based on the principles of harmony, said to create a longer life. We'll be looking at medicine and Chinese medicine in this class, and divination practices, ways of telling the future based on harmonizing with this force called the Tao. So we looked at just a snapshot of Confucianism, snapshot of Taoism, and our third religion is Buddhism, which comes from India to China. Buddhism has three main ideals. You have an enlightened teacher named the Buddha. You have a community of monks and nuns, a monastic order. Buddhism will introduce a monastic order, and this is called the Sangha, who will teach the traditions, who will impart the teachings, the Dharma. The teachings is what we call the Dharma of the Buddha. Buddhism will also introduce new holy figures. This is Kuan Yin, and there's this idea of a future savior, a future Buddha named Maitreya. So Buddhism introduces into the Yellow River Valley civilizations new holy savior beings called Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And this becomes part of the religious life of China. Alongside, and perhaps serving as the basis from which these three traditions, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, will build off of long-standing traditions of popular religion or folk religion. What do we mean by popular religion? Well, popular here is the religion of the people, folk religion, the religion of the ordinary folks. So what is that? Well, here we can see a picture of different deities associated with the Chinese structure of gods and goddesses, the pantheon. And popular folk religion. This will include the worship of gods and goddesses, typically often associated with nature. So there could be a god of a certain mountain in a certain region of China, a goddess of a certain river. Nature is key, nature is venerated. We have holy trees, holy mountains, holy stones. Divination attempts to try to figure out the future by channeling the voices and visions of the gods and goddesses. Magic, using things like special incantations or special chemical substances that are enchanted in order to ward off evil or bring fortune and prosperity. Healing of illness or overcoming adversity or warding off illness. The use of, let's say, a special talisman and an object often worn or ingested to ward off evil or to heal the ill. And we'll look more at Chinese medicine and alchemy throughout the semester. And then the later part of this class is we're going to see what happens when we go from talking about a river valley, and this is the Yellow River Valley and some of the major cities located along this river, to be talking about becoming a modern nation, a nation that has global influence. When we go from talking about emperors and hereditary lines of succession, of descent, of dynasties, we're going from dynasties and emperors to a modern day China, ruled by different political ideologies. This is Mao Zedong, who would be one of the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party and would push for his vision of what a communist China looks like. Well, some of you may have, I'm sure most of you have heard the term communism, but not really, perhaps not know all the details of what that word means. But we're going to have an entire week on Mao Zedong and communism. As we look at, this is the current Prime Minister of China and the flag of the PRC. The PRC means the People's Republic of China. So China is now a nation that has tremendous economic influence, and all regions of this nation, as the most populated nation in the world, is developing very quickly. And it's gaining an economic, political, global, and cultural influence. Within the context of modern day China, we'll look at some of the minority communities and their religious traditions. This will include looking at Islam in China. Islam comes into China in different waves, often associated with trade and commerce. We'll look at some of the Muslim communities of modern day China. And we'll end the class briefly by looking at Tibetan Buddhism. And this is a picture of two major figures of the last century, and that is Mao Zedong, we met earlier, and this is the Dalai Lama, who many Tibetans view as a very, very, very important religious leader for them. We're going to learn more about the history of this era in this class, of the meeting of China and Tibet becoming annexed by China, and the history of the Dalai Lamas. All right, that is the content of the class, a very, very, very broad overview. Some of the specific nuts and bolt information can be found in the syllabus. The syllabus is located on UNCG Canvas. Please do go over that and let me know if you have any questions. But some of the kind of key things I want to highlight. If you have not done so already, the syllabus lists 2 textbooks. You will need both of them starting next week. We will be doing a lot of work out of those books. The main grading of this class will come through your participation in different online modules, where there will typically be a discussion question, sometimes a homework assignment and sometimes a quiz. There will be a midterm exam and a final. I typically give very detailed study reviews prior to both of those. And the big thing is keeping up with the modules. Every Monday, I will release a new module for you to do, and that module must be completed by the following Sunday. I also will post up a new lecture for the week every Tuesday. All right, well, we are going to have a fun and exciting semester together. I look forward to getting to know all of you virtually. And we explore the history of this great ancient civilization. And we look at the tremendously diverse and rich cultures of modern day China. All right. Thank you. Stay safe, stay well, and stay tuned.